Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. Welcome back to Maven Money Talks podcast, and I'm here with Cara Rudin, and she is a wonderful estate planning attorney, and she's had her law office for a little over 18 years now, and helping individuals, families prepare their estates and trusts. And so I really appreciate you being here today. The goal is to just, understand a little bit about what trusts are, what they're appropriate for, and again, make people aware of, when to consider it, and maybe some misconceptions as well. So I appreciate you taking time to chat today. Before we dive into the trust, maybe you can talk a little bit just about your background and kind of what led you into estate planning.
I don't think it was a plan of mine to go into estate planning, but, really enjoyed the classes in law school. And then I ended up working with some other estate planning attorneys, and I was like, this is the perfect area for me. It's a little more intimate. I don't litigate, so to me it's kind of the perfect mix of getting to really know clients.
Right.
I like to think of my area as when I leave for the day, my clients are hugging me.
Awesome.
It's a lot, you really make a nice connection with clients.
Definitely.
Because you're talking about a lot of personal things.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get to know everything about the client, right?
You do.
Which is really, really important. I mean, as an advisor, we always want to know everything. And sometimes things can still be possibly hidden or, they forget about. But when putting together your estate, obviously it's really important that everything is out there. So that way it's all handled properly.
Correct. I mean, if you're not disclosing everything to your estate attorney, then he or she doesn't have the opportunity to do the proper planning. We need to know financial, family dynamics, anything else that might be going on so that we can help structure the best plan for your family.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about just, in terms of like a trust and estate planning. Can you just give us an idea of what does that really mean and a high level kind of definition of what it is?
So I'm doing a trust. Most people have what we call a revocable trust, an inter vivos trust, and that means you control the trust assets while you're alive. You create the trust while you're alive. What it really is it's essentially kind of a contract between the person setting up the trust, which is you, and then the trustee, which also most cases is you, and then the beneficiary of the trust, which during your lifetime is you. And then when you pass away, the beneficiary then becomes, loved ones, whomever that might be. And then you have a successor trustee that then steps into that place and makes sure those assets are divided. But I would say day to day, having the trust, there's nothing really different that you're not normally filing a separate tax return. You still control your trust assets. So it's not quite as weird of a concept as maybe it sounds for some.
When is it an important time to consider establishing a trust?
Setting up a trust, really, at least here in California, I would say for sure if you own any sort of real property. So if you own a home of any sort, vacation home, things like that, you want to make sure you have a trust. Also, if any investment accounts here, you would argue probably around 100,000 to make sure that those assets don't end up in probate.
Got it. Yeah.
But really, real property is probably the main.
Okay. Yeah. So probate, is I feel like the word that's always associated with trust, and you want to avoid probate.
You do.
So can you talk a little bit about what probate is and what that looks like in terms of, let's just for an example, you've got one home and a family.
Yeah, so the reason, at least in California, our probate process, you want to avoid it because, number one, it's really time-consuming here. So you're looking at an average probate probably being about 1.5 to 2 years. Wow. The cost of probate, it's not free.
Right.
So it can take away a large percent of the estate. So maybe $50,000 up. It really depends on the size of the estate. They take a percentage of it. So, and then you have to remember that both the executor of the estate or the administrator along with the attorney are both getting paid fees for that. So those probably are the main reasons that you want to avoid probate. If you do a trust and you fund it, which is probably the key word to that, you really can avoid probate.
Got it.
And not have to go through any of that process.
Okay. So it sounds like costs can add up pretty quickly.
Oh, it can.
And then it extends the timeline of maybe when your beneficiaries can really
have access to the assets. And people might say, well, the amount of money it costs to set up a trust or my estate planning documents, it's expensive, but it's never going to be as expensive as it would be to go through probate.
Got it.
Or litigate all these other concerns. So.
Okay. Good to know. And so you mentioned one thing that was even more important is funding the trust. So
Correct.
establishing the trust is one thing. What does funding the trust mean?
Funding the trust means if you don't put assets in the trust, meaning retitling those assets, so whether it be bank accounts, investment accounts, things like that, and retitling your real property, meaning a deed is prepared and recorded in the county of which that property is located, then there's no assets in the trust. So I always say you could have this beautiful binder or a bunch of paper that could essentially be worthless.
Right.
You need to put assets in the trust. And a lot of people are mistaken because most trusts have what we call a schedule of assets
Okay.
at the last page of the trust. And that normally will list out the assets that should be in the trust.
Okay.
That does not mean that they are in the trust.
Okay.
So a lot of people go, but look, I've got, it says right here, I have my house right here, or
Right.
these accounts. But until they've been titled and, retitled and recorded, things like that, they are not in the trust. So really important.
Okay.
Because if you don't have those assets in the trust, then you're going to have to do a probate.
Got it. So yeah, just because you have the trust set up doesn't mean that
that's
everything's
step one,
done.
and it's a very important step.
Right.
But step two, the funding of the trust, is just as important as well.
Got it.
And
Well,
it's a little time consuming, so.
Okay. So, and one thing that I think is important for people to consider too is the trust obviously can dictate who you want things to go to or who you don't want things to go to, where probate is just going to use kind of
Depending. So probate, you can, if you have a will, you will still end up doing a probate. So
Okay.
will could dictate, who items are going to.
Okay.
If you die, though, without a will, at least here in California, then you've died what we call intestate. And therefore, then the probate process, they will determine, based on the probate
Got
code,
it.
how those assets are distributed.
Okay.
So and some people might think, oh, well, I have a will, so I won't go into probate.
Okay.
Even with a will, and once again, everything I'm talking about is regarding California
Yeah,
law,
yeah.
specific. Even with a will here, you end up in probate.
Okay.
So the trust is the way to avoid that. By setting up a trust, you designate who you want named as beneficiaries. You also have the opportunity to set up what we call maybe sub-trusts, so trusts for children. Maybe they're getting them at certain ages, maybe for a lifetime. You can create special needs trusts. I mean, there's so many different things and different types of planning that you can do once you have the main trust set up.
Got it. So yeah, so it sounds like you probably spend a lot of time at the front end to understand the client, what their goals are, what they're looking for, and like you mentioned, getting a good understanding of the family dynamic to know, hey, maybe there's other things that we need to
Correct.
consider within this.
Exactly. I mean, understanding our, alcohol or drug use, is that something we're seeing in one of the children? We want to try to protect the money, the assets, as long as possible. So these are all things that we need to discuss. Is there, mental illness concerns, special needs, anything that we would want to do that, once again, protect the assets and also protect the children from having maybe access to large amounts of money.
Right.
Or in the event of a divorce or something like that, to keep that property separate.
Got it. Good.
Yes. So.
Awesome. What are some misconceptions about trusts? I mean, one that I hear a good amount of time is like, hey, I don't pay taxes with a trust. And so what are some other misconceptions, or maybe just questions that you get initially when people are setting up a trust that they think they're getting this through the trust? And
so I think one of the big thing is revocable trusts, and I'm going to focus on that.
Okay.
They do not offer asset protection. So
Okay.
if you have a regular living trust, revocable trust, if you get sued, they will sue you as they would whether you had a trust or not.
Got it.
But that's why you have a revocable trust. You control those assets. So with that, it's a positive. You
Right.
control those assets. However, you also control those assets. So therefore, if you get sued, they will sue you. It goes right through
Right.
the trust.
Okay.
There's nothing protecting it. The other one, which we did talk about, is having to get assets in the trust. I don't think people always understand that step and how important it is.
what are things that people should think about when they're getting ready to establish trust? Is there anything specific before establishing a trust?
So before establishing a trust, I mean, different estate attorneys work different ways. A lot of times people provide you maybe with a workbook or something ahead of time to kind of think through the process. If you have, minor children, really considering guardianship, who's going to act as the guardian if in the event you and a spouse pass away,
Right.
Who would step in and take care of the children. Also trustees, really important to name successor trustees. Number one, people that you trust.
Right.
They have access to all of the money. Also, people that get along well with others. They have to be good at communication. You don't want a trustee who doesn't get along with the beneficiaries. That's
Right.
not going to work out
Yep.
well. They don't have to be an accountant, your trustee. They don't
Okay.
have to be a CPA or a financial advisor. You don't
Right.
necessarily need them to do that. But what
Right.
you need them to do is be willing to know what they don't know.
Got it.
I think what's more scary is when you get a successor trustee that thinks that they know what they're doing and
Right.
everything they're doing,
Right.
and therefore they're not getting the advice that they need.
Got it.
A successor trustee should bring in the attorney, the CPA, the financial advisor, and everybody works together as a team to
Yep.
all give the advice on how to best administrate the
Got
trust.
it. Love it.
So there are really important things that happen when somebody has a trust and the successor trustee is then doing the administration on that trust.
A few more things.
Yeah.
So when should trusts be updated, reviewed?
So, I tell my clients about every 3 to 5 years, at least take your estate documents out and just flip through them. Make sure everyone's still alive. The people you named are still communicating with them.
Right.
I've had clients where they name guardians and apparently within 6 months after setting everything up, they no longer communicated with the people.
Yeah.
So just kind of make sure everyone's still in good health.
Okay.
And then obviously if it's a death, divorce, marriage, birth, anything big change in assets either way, then you do want to call your attorney and for sure make an appointment. And make sure, if you know of any tax laws or things that it may have updated, that you want to get those reviewed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, I think we've covered a good amount in terms of the kind of the general gist of trusts and why they're important, considerations and establishing them, when to review them. Is there any other things that come up that are top of mind for you?
I think the other thing I notice is some people think of trusts are maybe only for wealthy people.
Okay.
And I would say no. The average American, at least here in California, a trust is really important.
Okay.
Like I said,
Right.
if you own a home, it doesn't matter if you have a large mortgage on the home. You setting up a trust. And a trust is just one part of that.
Okay.
We're talking full estate planning documents. So that would be the trust. With a trust, you always have a will. So that's important to know, is that if you are setting up a trust, you want to also make sure you have a will that goes with it. And then the other two documents that are really important are the durable power of attorney for finances,
Okay,
and
yep.
also the Advanced Healthcare Directive.
Yep.
So all of those documents comprise of your full estate plan, and each one is really important.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong age. I've had clients in their 20s setting up trusts, and I've had clients in their 80s.
Right.
As long as you have capacity
Yeah.
to set everything up.
Right.
But really important to get your estate planning documents done.
Everything was really great. I really appreciate all the information that you provided. I think everybody is going to benefit from, getting some of this information. And we'll put Cara's information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to her, have a consultation. But again, really appreciate you taking
Thanks
the time
for
to chat
having
today.
me. I appreciate it.
And really appreciate it. So thank you.